Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Jenny Lesser, and I'm the Business Development Manager here at United Training. Welcome to today's webinar, The Top 10 Benefits of Windows Virtual Desktop on Azure, presented by Justin Coffey with the Red Level Group. We are using GoToWebinar for today's session, so we will share a copy of this recording with you. We do encourage participation throughout the webinar, so please use that questions panel in your GoToWebinar dashboard. United Training is excited to present this today, so I will now hand it over to you, Justin.
Perfect, thank you. So just to get a quick introduction out, my name is Justin Coffey. I am the Security and Compliance Practice Director at Red Level. Brief background on me. I started my career about 10 years ago within the Microsoft partner community. I am what Microsoft refers to as a born in the cloud consultant. I started my career with BPOS, or the Business Productivity Online Suite, which was the predecessor to Office 365, really focused on the 2007 version of things like Exchange and SharePoint, and we had Office Communicator Server and SkyDrive and all those different pieces. That evolved into Office 365 back in July 2011. Continued the career. Microsoft Azure was the next product to really ship, and we started focusing on infrastructure as service. Then Enterprise Mobility plus Security Suite continued to get more mature and branch out. And then Windows 10 came really out within that portfolio, with Windows 10 Business and Windows 10 Enterprise as more of the service offering. And that makes up Microsoft 365 today. And then most recently, desktop virtualization really became part of my scope. And that is where we'll be talking about Windows Virtual Desktop on Azure today. GRC is governance, risk management, compliance, and that'll clearly come back to my title today and where that fits. Over the course of my career, I was a modern workplace partner seller. So I was a solution sales professional with Microsoft, and then a technical solutions or technology solutions professional for about 5 years on supporting their corporate accounts teams and their state local government team. And lastly, I've been fortunate enough through the partners that I've worked with to have been awarded multiple Partner of the Year awards within their SMB segment in the former Heartland District, which was Michigan, Ohio, Kentucky, and Tennessee. I included some contact details in case you have any questions directly for me. Otherwise, please feel free to reach out to either of the groups later today. So jumping in, since we've got a lot to talk about, I want to jump into the first one, and this is kind of a light one to get started, but it's really just trying to lay the foundation on what the benefits for WVD on Azure are. So if you're unfamiliar with Windows Virtual Desktop, it's really important to understand, first and foremost, what desktop virtualization is all about, and really what benefits it's providing the organization all up. So here are some of the common ones that we see when we're supporting our clients in this kind of solution area. Obviously, with COVID-19, there's a mad dash for everyone having to work from home to adhere to the government regulations and all those pieces. And with the laptop shortage and everything else and VPN connectivity issues, this really became a hot topic and a huge area of interest for a lot of Red Level's clients throughout the United States and beyond. The first category is really in the security and regulation focus, and based on my title, this is becoming a very, very hot topic for a lot of organizations out there that find themselves being partially or fully in a regulated industry. Usually we see that being financial services, healthcare, government. We're seeing a huge increase with that within the defense contractor segment, as well as they kind of work towards their CMMC certification requirements. So this is a very attractive way to provide their employees or even contractors the capabilities that they need to do their job, but really make sure that it's adhering to the security regulation or the compliance regulations and any specific security requirements that they have, and kind of remove that dependency on the physical device itself. So it's been a very attractive way to do that, and that's been an ongoing thing. Elastic Workforce is huge, and I think this one speaks more to what's going on a lot more. Within Red Level, we're seeing a tremendous amount of M&A activity across different industries. So with that, trying to make those changes without interrupting business operations or business continuity has been really, really important. WVD provides a great way to get those employees that are either being acquired or divested, being able to get them into a fully functional Windows 10 desktop or just virtual desktop environment in general, so they can continue work, have access to the applications and data they need in a secure way, while IT does the tasks that they need to do to really kind of get those devices refreshed and aligned to the organization that they're going to be working for in the future. Short-term employees, this is a great one. Laptops can be expensive, especially based on the various workloads that we're throwing at them. Applications continue to be more resource heavy. Excel, all the cloud applications that we're surfacing through our web browser and all the different tabs there. So being able to provide an optimized and high-performing desktop environment, instead of having to go buy and procure all those, moderately to potentially even high expensive laptop or desktop devices, desktop virtualization provides a far greater and financially sound way to do that, just through a operating expense for as long as you need it, and then you can just cycle them down. Contractor and partner access is becoming extremely important, and this is going to really dovetail back into security and regulation. But with all the increase in regulatory compliance, we're seeing a lot around that contractors and business partners need to adhere to those same requirements. These documents, these regulatory documents, are extending to say that it's not just about the employee, it's any user that is accessing that environment, which is ultimately how it should be. We're just seeing more language and enforcement in those areas where there's currently, I think, been a little bit more of informality or casual enforcement. Specific employees, so just like contractors and partners, there's going to be some reasons in short-term employees, even true FTEs, full-time employees that fit specific areas. So branch workers, call center employees, bring your own device and mobile. Again, COVID really is reshaping a lot of what it means to be a BYOD and mobile employee. We're seeing Red Level being out of Detroit. This one was a big one for us, but this was a global announcement that Ford Motor Company has made the decision that about 30,000 employees are going to be considered flex. Which I think they're one of the first major ones that at least I've seen outside of the technology sector that's made that kind of broad commitment. Salesforce had made that commitment earlier this year, where they're going to kind of provide the 3 tiers of come into the office, work 100% from home, or also that flex term. And I think that might be the term that sticks is, in IT, we like to use the word hybrid. Am I at home? Am I here? Am I where? It sounds like more of the business HR team, they're using the term flex. So flex employees, which might become that de facto standard, that may become something like desktop virtualization, may be really, really impactful to ensure that people have what they need, or if something happens to their laptop, or whatever device they're using, that if they're working from home, they have an alternative device that they could at least use that to access a corporate managed virtualized desktop to go ahead and get work done in case something happens, or just in general. So we're seeing a lot of that too. There's also the need around specific line of business applications, whether just from security or just from where we're going to flirt a little bit into that next one, it's the legacy apps. Especially specialized workloads are also one of those categories where just with the rapid change of hardware performance, with just new R&D and new innovation that kind of comes out of that, we all know the saying, buy tech and it's probably even more depreciated than a car off a lot. So when we look at this new hardware or look at the new application requirements, what we're putting these on. You look at design and engineering like AutoCAD and just what that needs. You can get into media with graphic design, videography, and things like that, video editing. Legacy apps, especially again here in Detroit where Red Level's based, is we have a lot of manufacturing. So with those manufacturers, it's very common to see, very old applications used here and there. As we look to modernize the device experience altogether, it becomes really important to say, well, how do we get that experience with Microsoft solutions like Microsoft Endpoint Manager, including Config Manager, Intune, Autopilot, Endpoint Analytics, stuff like that? How do we really get the most value out of those tools if we still have a legacy app that's holding us back? Deliver that app via desktop virtualization, and kind of use those other tools like the Microsoft Endpoint Manager portfolio to do the rest. So that's become very attractive as well. And then just like public cloud in general, platform as a service is really important here. Software dev test. So there's the one side of we have the dev environment to work on applications, work on various things within the back end of the environment. Being able to pilot those changes on a device before it goes into production from a end user perspective. Again, this is a great way to see the behavior, test and validate that, do your UAT testing, build documentation around it, all of those different things. So at the end of the day, virtualization is extremely important and just provides that elasticity and flexibility we need with kind of the ever-changing requirements, both internally and things with like external security, compliance, etc. So moving to number 2, it's now kind of getting a little more focused on what's the benefit of virtualization delivered on Azure. So understanding what Windows Virtual Desktop is very important, because a lot of people, I think, get confused about what it actually is and what the value ultimately is going to be. So to kind of start off, Windows Virtual Desktop is not a specific type of virtualization. So I'll actually grab the pen here. It is more of a service. So think of it as virtualization infrastructure as a managed service by Microsoft. So the clients, the broker, the management, the gateway, diagnostics, load balancing, all of these more back-end roles, this is what Microsoft is delivering as a platform as a service. So they're going to handle all of those capabilities within the Azure Management Portal for you. If you prefer to use PowerShell and really want to code, you can do it that way. But ultimately, this is a Microsoft managed piece for desktop virtualization. So these are those things that you would traditionally have to manage in your on-premise remote desktop services environment. But in the Microsoft world on Azure, they've taken those responsibilities off your plate, and they also manage the underlying infrastructure. So from an infrastructure as a service layer, they're going to provide the servers, they're going to provide the storage, they're going to provide kind of the networking infrastructure that then you can customize for your needs. We'll talk more about that one a little bit later. So really, when we look at WVD, it's more of what you have control over. And this is really making it work for your business, and we'll hash some of these out. But to kind of start off, you have your Azure subscription, which manages how you want to do things. And there's 2 ways to really leverage the WVD service in a way that's meaningful for your business. The first is more of your traditional full desktop. So you deliver a full desktop experience on Windows 10 Enterprise. This is more going to be your single user. This is going to be more synonymous with like VDI or virtual desktop infrastructure. We have Windows Server 2012 R2 and newer. This is going to be your remote desktop services. And then, prior to that, it was terminal services, but using to more modern, this is remote desktop services over here. We have Windows 7 Enterprise full desktop, so same thing in that VDI type environment or VDI model. We're going to really come back to this because this is really neat because we still have organizations out there due to legacy apps or still cost constraints that they are still running Windows 7 in their environment, typically, excuse me, more so on a desktop or laptop basis. Now, I haven't really seen the virtualized side of that too much, but I have seen clients and other organizations that we've come across that are still using Windows 7, which, as a reminder, it ended support, I believe, over 2 years ago. I think it was January. So 2 years ago. This one is going to be, one of the big topics is multi-session Windows 10 Enterprise. This is what has gotten a ton of attraction towards the Windows Virtual Desktop experience. A lot of people like to associate multi-session Windows 10 Enterprise with WVD. But as a reminder, again, we have VDI with Windows 10 Enterprise, we have VDI with Windows 7 Enterprise, and we have more RDS on Windows Server 2012 R2 and newer. But multi-session Windows 10, this was really what stole the show. So the other topic is remote app. So in those instances where you're able to, and the app supports it, you can deliver an application directly to your users. And there's some really cool stuff, and I'm going to show that in the demo later to really show how neat this is. But the remote app capability is just where you are virtualizing an app on typically a Windows 10 virtual server running on Azure, and you're just surfacing up the app. This is a way where sometimes you don't need to deliver the full desktop experience and all the compute and storage resources that are going to go with that would increase cost. There might be instances where there's one app that doesn't really have dependencies on other apps where this is a perfect model. Surface this up, and it's a great day for everybody, and it's a great experience. The additional piece of your control is, as a part of all this, the management and policies and kind of what those look like, the image that you have, so your golden image, how you install those apps, the profile itself for your users. You maintain control of how you want to do that based on either existing investments, existing processes, etc. You can usually pretty much emulate what you're doing on-prem, or you can take advantage of some of the new capabilities offered in Azure. You get to determine your user density, what the virtual machine sizes are. You can define scaling policies, which really are attractive within a public cloud environment like Azure, where it's based on your consumption, which we'll come back to. But being able to define those scaling policies and how you want your users to be mapped to the various host pools and VMs, this really lets you kind of control both the user experience, what that performance looks like, as well as the cost. So there's a lot of flexibility there. User management identity is handled through both on-premises Active Directory as well as Azure Active Directory. So Azure AD is going to be more of what the WVD service is leveraging for accessing the virtualized desktop environment together. Once you get through that gate, then it will just use more of your traditional on-premises Active Directory domain services, which can be hosted in Azure, so it doesn't have to be on-premise, but usually most of us are going to have a true hybrid environment where we're still having domain controllers on-premise. But if you're small, trying to kind of just take advantage of full IaaS, you can migrate those domain controllers to Azure and really move to more of a true cloud native model. So that is really what we start to look at when we see virtualization delivered on Azure. Lots of flexibility. It's not just one option. You have the full desktop capability, you have the remote app capability, which we'll dive into a little bit later, and we have all the flexibility on management and the corresponding policies. So Microsoft's taking some of the more back-end requirements off of our plate so we can focus on really that user experience and the app lifecycle and all those other pieces. So one of the other benefits, so you can migrate your existing Windows Server remote desktop services environment, desktops and apps, to Azure. So this is a way to simplify that experience. Let's just say that you may have older physical equipment that's running the RDS environment. There might be opportunities with other line of business applications or other things that you have that you're looking to migrate to public cloud. So you can do effectively a lift and shift of your existing RDS environment. You'll be able to ditch the back-end pieces, that broker server, the gateway, etc. So you can offload those to RDS and just have those front-end RDS servers where the users are actually ultimately connecting and where they're doing their work. So as long as it's Windows Server 2012 with RDS 2012 R2 and newer, you're going to be all right. And then you have app compatibility for existing Windows Server images that were used on premises. So this really makes it attractive for leveraging the existing RDS investments that you have, and then you can develop a long-term strategy, which is what we're really going to look at here. So as I mentioned, WVD is not just one specific option. You have a lot of flexibility on which tier makes the most sense. So if you already have remote desktop investments, you can go ahead and start here and get up into Azure, and you're going to get the benefits there. Depending on the workload and your needs, you can look at multi-session Windows 10 Enterprise or just more of that traditional VDI experience. We usually see VDI, like Windows 10 Enterprise on WVD, more for those true VDI experiences where you have specific applications like AutoCAD or creative software like Adobe Creative Cloud and things like that, where it makes more sense just to give a dedicated desktop to a specific user and assign that on a one-to-one basis. What Microsoft's done is enable new capabilities where you can automatically have that desktop, that virtual desktop, shut down after a specific amount of inactivity to save costs there. And again, this is currently limited just to the single Windows 10 Enterprise setup, but you can make it where it will power up on Connect. So that way, you don't need to request an administrator or something to turn that single Windows 10 Enterprise VM on for that assigned user. When they connect, it'll automatically, the Azure service will automatically power up their specific VM with their image, their data, their everything, and they can get right to work without any IT involvement. But the real attractive thing that we're seeing, and this is what, again, has become pretty much synonymous with WVD, is multi-session Windows 10. And right now, the multi-session Windows 10 experience is only available on Azure. So what this allows us to do is effectively deliver multi-user VDI. So we are able to deliver the true Windows 10 desktop experience to multiple users and still get the benefits of Win32 apps, Universal Windows platform apps, if you're using any of those. Those are more like the modern store apps. They are the WVD instances are optimized for the Microsoft 365 apps, which is the new name for Office 365 Pro Plus. So Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, Microsoft Teams, things like that. It is optimized for desktop virtualization in this instance, just like in the Windows 10. And you get your semi-annual channel update. So your spring and fall releases on the feature and quality updates. So what makes this so attractive, though, is just the cost benefits. And it's why remote desktop services has been so attractive, is it allows you to have a more personal, more familiar user experience, leverage especially a lot of the new integration between the Office suite in Windows 10, including OneDrive and again, Teams and other things, to really deliver a phenomenal user experience, but still get the value of the Windows 10 Enterprise security capabilities and some of the additional capabilities around security and compliance, again, which we'll chat about a little bit later. So the cost benefits is what made this really impactful, and that's what really rose its popularity in the market, and then COVID just really accelerated it. But what we're really seeing too is it wasn't just a magical thing. It's because of an acquisition Microsoft made where now it can handle the user profiles and dynamically attach them to the specific Windows 10 session host that the user is being assigned to when they connect. So now that they have that technology, they've really been able to get it where it needs to be. It's been out for, I think, going on a year and a half, maybe going on 2.5 years. Everything's flying by these days, maybe a year and a half. But point is, the value here is that the technology now exists to deliver that phenomenal user experience. It's a better, more familiar desktop experience for the users. You get the enterprise control with security and compliance in a way that you just can't get quite with RDS based on what Microsoft's doing with Microsoft 365. And you're going to be able to get some really attractive cost benefits from doing it. So Moving 5, this is another big one compared to others. It's being able to, this is going to be for the full WVD experience. We're able to deliver it to any device from basically any platform. So I threw up more of a technical table just to add some clarity, but Microsoft has invested in building a modern remote desktop client. So the former one that for the IT pros on the call, or those that have a lot of attention to detail, traditional like RDS and terminal services use MSTSC. Again, MSTSC. Windows Virtual Desktop uses a new client called MSRDC. So it has been re-engineered for this kind of Azure public cloud environment to optimize the protocols and the packets and all these different things. So that way it can really deliver a great user experience and do a bunch of other really, really interesting things on the back end that ultimately we as IT like, our users like. It's a win-win. So Microsoft has the client available for Windows 10. It has the version that's available through the Microsoft Store for Windows 10 and ARM devices with Windows 10. We have a Mac OS version, an iOS version, an Android version, and this supports, you can run WVD or access WVD managed virtual desktop environments through an HTML5 web browser, which is pretty much all the modern ones. So Chromium-based Edge, Chrome itself, Safari, Firefox, etc. So it's pretty much most. With Linux, Microsoft has the port for, they provided a Linux SDK for the community to build on. Currently, there's thin client support on Linux with Dell, IGEL or IGEL, and Computing, Stratodesk, and HP. So there are probably more in development, but even on Linux, you can get thin clients through, the big names again are going to be Dell and HP. But then there's IGEL and Computing, Stratodesk as well that you could look into. So you don't need to even buy a Windows 10 device to be able to access this or use a Mac. If you're going to go the full desktop route, that's a really attractive and cost-effective way to do that. As you kind of look on the right, you can see the table. So you can get that full remote desktop experience in a full or windowed mode on all the different platforms available. You can then start to see where kind of it starts to split up. And some of this is going to be based more on just the nature of the device you're on. Like multi-monitor support makes a lot of sense on a Windows 10 desktop and on a Mac desktop or laptop. You're not really going to run into common scenarios on a iPhone or an Android tablet where you're going to have really multi-monitor support being really kind of a common theme. Dynamic resolution, you can kind of see where that scales a little bit based on, again, more of like the computer layer versus more of the mobile phone and tablet layer. And you can see from a security standpoint, all of them support multi-factor authentication to provide native security experiences to access these desktops. But again, you can kind of just read through this and see what some of the common ones are. But the good news is, again, you can deliver that Windows Virtual Desktop experience from virtually any device on any platform. So it's been really, really attractive on that as well. So when we look at the cost side, what's really been attractive for a lot of our clients is the fact that based on the Microsoft investments they've already made, they're already eligible for WVD. So for those that are looking to access it, access the Windows 10 single and multi-session or Windows 7 with Windows Virtual Desktop, pretty much across the segments, if you own any of these really common license types, and actually this is a typo, that's Business Premium. If you own these, you already have the rights to the Windows version of WVD. So with a lot of our clients moving or have already moved to Microsoft 365 based on their security and compliance and device management needs, this is a very attractive option for them. So as long as you've made that shift from Office 365 to M365, you're very likely to be there. And actually, this also includes F3. So Business Premium, F1, F3, E3, E5. For education, you have A3, A5, and the list kind of goes on, and you can see those details. If you're going to start with moving your existing RDS environment up, you just need to make sure that you have your RDS or Remote Desktop Services CAL or Client Access License with active software assurance, because you're going to be running it in Azure, which is where licensing mobility or license mobility comes into play. So that would really be the only piece that you'd be looking for from the user side, is just if you have RDS CALs, if they have active SA, you're good to go. If you're going to move to more of that modern and multi-session, multi-user Windows 10 experience on WVD, as long as you're on one of these core M365 SKUs or the standalone Windows 10 Enterprise SKUs, you should be good to go. And again, this for a lot of the organizations that we're working with, they already have a lot of the required M365 SKUs, so they already have that option for them, or they already have the licensing requirements for that piece. Now, on the other side, it's okay, well, what else do we have to pay for? Good part is you don't actually pay for the WVD service itself. So as long as you have the one of those M365 or Windows 10 licenses or subscriptions, or the RDS CAL with active SA, that's really what you're paying for the WVD service. So that's covering those platform as a service capabilities. Then you're just only responsible for what you consume. Public cloud, whether it's Azure, AWS, GCP, it's all about just consumption. So it varies based on which component, whether it's a virtual machine in compute, storage, or networking, but everything has a different billing meter. And I think virtual machines are down to the second on billing, which is, depending on the size or the quantity of VMs, per second, will add up, pennies here, pennies there, and depending on the size of those VMs, it could be dollars here, dollars there, based on the seconds. But when you start looking at it, you're only paying for the compute, storage, and network that you're really consuming. With WVD, that's usually more of the, again, the WVD session hosts themselves. It's the storage associated to those, and then any networking that's consumed. So egress is what you pay for from a networking standpoint, so kind of the outbound traffic. But with that new remote desktop client that Microsoft shipped, you have a optimized experience with that. So the bandwidth that those packets are using have been re-engineered to limit the size, make them more efficient, and again, that's going to translate into less networking costs and bandwidth being consumed and charged. You can kind of see the details. So if you are already an organization that has made some more advanced virtual desktop investments using things like Citrix Cloud or VMware Horizon Cloud, you are going to be charged the Linux compute rates where you're not paying for the Windows Server rate built into the price on Windows 10 single, Windows 10 multi-session, and Windows Server implementations. So you would just need to bring the appropriate Windows licenses that you are likely already using on premise. And then as kind of the added perk, especially for the scenarios where you know that you are going to be using WVD for at least a specific amount of users or a subset, you can take advantage of Azure Reserved Virtual Machine instances or Azure Reserved instances, where you can effectively just contractually commit to a specific VM's family, so like a B series, a D series, etc., on a 1 year or a 3 year basis. And based on that, you can save up to 72% compared to just pay-as-you-go pricing. It's been a second since this was announced. I think it's been about a year and a half, but it's still something that people have not heard, is you can make those 1 to 3 year capacity commitments and then just pay them monthly. So it's all the benefit of, you don't have to worry about capital expenses. You can leverage that pay-as-you-go benefit of, I'm just paying monthly, but your price is locked in based on that earlier commitment, which can again have a massive price impact on what your Azure runtime costs are, both for WVD and just Azure virtual machines and the other eligible resources like storage and databases, etc., within the Azure platform. So there's been a lot that we've done with our clients to make sure that they are maximizing that when we know there's going to be some predictability on how long they're planning on using those specific workloads. So as we shift to now kind of security, this is also one of the best perks of WVD versus even just on-premises RDS or VDI for virtualization. It's blending security across the Microsoft ecosystem. So first and foremost, under WVD, it's the reverse connect capability. So when you, and I'll show you what this looks like in the demo, but when you connect through the modern the modern remote desktop client, you are connecting through Azure AD, which is going to kind of signal that to the WVD PaaS service in Azure. It will kind of authenticate, make sure everything's good, and then send a request back down to actually trigger the connection. So there's no open port requirements or anything like that. So it's very, very secure from that standpoint compared to potentially traditional RDS on-prem or other scenarios. So from there, then the session hosts themselves or those VMs are AD or domain joins. So then you're just using your traditional on-prem identity to get in. If you're doing hybrid identity, which virtually all of our clients are, that's kind of that standard, is single set of credentials. It's just the same username and password for both. Once you do it once, it remembers it, you're good to go. Number two is with Microsoft 365. So we get the perks of things like multi-factor authentication and conditional access, which are both attractive from the end user perspective to accessing the service itself, to accessing the desktop, as well as from the IT standpoint of being able to access the backend environment. The role-based access control is going to be attractive more for the IT side, so that way you can narrow in what tasks and what privileges IT has, but you're also using RBAC within WVD to assign users to specific host pools and application groups and all that. So it's that's based on the Azure AD platform, so it makes that really attractive for management. And then there's integration now with Windows Virtual Desktop with Microsoft Defender for Endpoint for Windows 10. So if you are using what was formerly Microsoft Defender ATP, it is now Microsoft Defender for Endpoint and specifically for Windows 10. Or if you are doing RDS and you're just migrating up, you can use Azure Defender, which is ultimately the same underlying software. You can leverage that integration with Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. That scales to iOS, Mac OS, Android, and Linux, and the varying versions of Windows Server. So you can have that true synergy with the same endpoint protection platform for all of your security and threat protection needs there across the WVD session host, as well as the rest of the corporate or even personally owned devices if you push those out to those devices as well. So that's a perk to have that integration directly with things like multi-user, multi-session, Windows 10 on WVD. And then when we look at Azure altogether, this list continues to grow and it's probably already outdated. From a security standpoint and a compliance standpoint, we're up to over 90 global compliance offerings, over 3,500 global cybersecurity experts. Microsoft is ingesting over 6.5 trillion signals daily across the globe, and Microsoft has been spending over $1 billion in cybersecurity investments for the last couple of years. And if you're new to Microsoft, that might come as a surprise, but if you've been paying attention, you can see just the maturity across their security portfolio. It's been refreshing to see that. So as we get into the last two, we're going to talk about the shared responsibility model with Microsoft. This is, again, really going to be attractive from a benefit standpoint on what your responsibilities are versus what Microsoft's are, and as we look. So this is broader than just WVD. This is more of the shared responsibility model with cloud in general. But from a Microsoft standpoint, you no longer have to worry about the physical host, the physical network, the physical data center, and servers. So when we look at that, all that responsibility transfers to the cloud provider. So they are going to be responsible for their data centers, the host, the storage, all of those components, networking components. They own that exclusively. Traditionally, or as it shows here, on premises, this is where you are going to be responsible for those in the entirety. Now, where it varies by service type, that is true. So in WVD, you are ultimately responsible for creating the image that you want and how you want to build that out. There's going to be some pieces on the network controls that you still get to have control over. You're going to be responsible for surfacing up your applications. But with some of the new updates with WVD, with like MSIX for attaching apps to session host without actually installing them on the session host, this is now moving into more of that PaaS experience. It's flirting with it with WVD, which is really, really neat. It's really going to streamline how the app or application lifecycle works within Windows 10 single and multi-session WVD scenarios. And then with identity and directory infrastructure, Microsoft takes on full responsibility for Azure AD for managing the infrastructure. You would just be responsible for the accounts and identities up top, but with the domain controller for on-prem AD DS, if you put it on Azure, you're going to be responsible for the VM and then the actual Active Directory domain services environment itself. And then you'll just sync that to Azure AD, and then again, you'll have full responsibility there. So as we move to the third tier, your information, your data, the devices that are used, again, in the WVD context, what is accessing those? You're responsible for whatever that extent is. If it's BYOD, then you can leverage things like conditional access and stuff to limit their ability to connect to the service for security and compliance reasons, whether those are external or internal. If they're your devices, yeah, you're still going to be responsible for managing them in their entirety as you see fit to be able to just, again, access WVD. And then you're responsible for the accounts and identities, mapping what users can access what from a host pool application group standpoint, using those RBAC capabilities I referenced. So at the end of the day, though, it's really kind of getting you out of the on-prem hardware business. So really shifting that off you and your team's plate if you're within IT, and starting to even streamline what the responsibility even looks like using some of the new Azure services to automate some of those functions as well. So again, it's going to vary on the specific piece, but there are things that you can do to automate even what would have been your responsibilities by acquiring services specifically for that, like update management, backups, things like that. You can leverage additional services to, again, pretty much automate that responsibility and streamline it. You'll just be responsible for setting it up. So for the last one is going to be focused on the cloud security advantages in general. So there's just the time benefit of shifting some of that on-premises data center management off your plate and hardware life cycles and all of that. But what we really see, and this is core to a lot of what my team and I have been focusing on, is how do we do better with security, better with compliance, with limited staff in a global market where there's a huge talent shortage for IT security professionals and compliance professionals. So you can see traditionally, it's very complicated because you, again, just like that shared responsibility model, you have all responsibility for the entire on-premises environment. And as we see this kind of proliferation of cloud application usage from the line of business standpoint through things like Office 365, tools like GoToWebinar, Teams, etc., we see that there's just a ton of stuff to try to secure, especially as our data usage increases, where people are accessing stuff increases, the different platforms and device types that people are using. The traditional approach is extremely challenging, especially, again, with a talent shortage and a limited budget to do that. So it's very chaotic. By shifting over, again, this is beyond just the management side of the shared responsibility model. It's also on moving to a more cloud-enabled security model. So shifting those commodity responsibilities to your cloud provider and reallocating your resources to where it matters most, and then using things like cloud-based security capabilities to do a better job, a more effective job of helping to mature and improve your security posture, and then being able to start to leverage cloud intelligence with AI and machine learning capabilities to help improve detection and response times that's just critical in general for the entire environment. But when we look at Windows Virtual Desktop, having the ability to use things like Azure Security Center and the Microsoft or the Azure Defender portfolio, the integration with Microsoft 365 and its security, compliance, and management tools, having those native integrations, the automation that comes with it, the enhanced security that comes with it, that really rounds us out as to what those advantages truly are. So it's not just the day-to-day of, I'm the IT utility team, I've got to make sure that we're maintaining and keeping things kind of up to date. It's also kind of your security approach. So it goes both ways. So I'm going to shift this for a moment and move to just my desktop here. So when we look at the remote desktop client, the modern one, this is what it looks like on first launch. It is going to ask the user to subscribe with a URL. If you want to provide your users with the subscribed URL, this isn't usually very common, but it's something you can do to help. So I'll just hit subscribe, and we're going to get if you're a Microsoft Cloud customer, you'll see that it's just going to pop up the common Azure AD login screen. So I will log in with our demo account. What you'll notice is, as I go ahead and do this, I'm going to get prompt to see if I want to allow Azure AD to register this or allow it to manage it. Because this is a demo, I'm going to uncheck that to say no, the sign-in's just for this app only. And then from there, it's going to query the Windows Virtual Desktop service and figure out what resources I've been assigned. And you can see that I have all these individual applications as well as a standard desktop. So I'm going to just quickly adjust so I can change my settings since I have multiple screens here in my home office. I'm going to say I want to select my display. I just want this one. I want to maximize to that current display, and I get all these little user tweak settings to just make it work. I can identify just to make sure I know what's what, and I'll just click that. And now when I go ahead and launch it, we're going to see more of what looks like that traditional desktop screen. Since it's my first time logging in, I have to do this. I can click Remember Me, so I don't have to do more of that sign in through more of what is traditional ADDS. We'll see the desktop go. We can see FS Logic, which is handling the dynamic user profiles. If there's any policies, it's running through that initial sign-in. And then as it completes that sign-in process, we will get to that, that Windows 10 desktop. I just turned this on, so it might be take a second. And what we can see here is that I have my fully functional Windows desktop. I can go into Edge. I will go and type, we'll go into Excel. We'll give that a moment. Like I said, I just turned this on, so I'm sure I'm the first person logging in, as I'm, I think, the only one jumping into it today. So we'll let that kind of jump up. And then I will go to Excel. And then from there, I can just do whatever I need to do. I see I have OneDrive automatically syncing. I have a lot that this device is already being optimized for using group policy. In the upcoming future, it's scheduled for calendar Q2, which we're getting very close to. So hopefully closer to mid to late Q2, we'll see actually Intune and Microsoft Endpoint Manager support for multi-session Windows 10 management. Right now, that's available on the traditional option with single users on Windows 10 via WVD, so you can use Intune there to manage the device and handle those pieces. For the multi-session, it's a little more complicated with the varying users, so we are seeing that come through. But as you can see, I can be in this this spreadsheet, and I can click around, and because we're on GoToWebinar, there might be a little bit of some lag there, but for my desktop, this is extremely fluid, and I can go do what I need to do. I can do all the things that I would need to do in my standard job. I believe I still have this functional, but we get the benefits of just, again, the full M365, where I can see the various applications that I have access to, and I have single sign-on, so I can see I have access to Salesforce. And I can just do what I need to do in a secured, fully managed Windows 10 desktop that I need to do my job in. So just like that, single sign-on. Again, this is powered through M365 and Azure AD, but all of this is just seamless for me through this web browser. Everything's just working. So I have, again, that optimized desktop experience that I would want. I have Microsoft Teams. I can, jump on meetings, share video, all of that. I can even, with print redirection, if I allow that to be enabled, I can also do print redirection to my devices through the desktop client. So if I drop this down, I can see I've got my local printer here. I could print out to it. I can do all of those things, so I can deliver a great experience. If, again, I'm in a regulated environment, I do not want print redirection to devices locally here, I can disable that. I have all of that flexibility for how I want to deliver that experience. So I will disconnect from this now, and I'll show you just more of the remote app, which is still one of my favorites. So as we log out, we'll have this drop out. I'm going to we'll just pick on Paint. So when we have Paint, I'm now remoting into a different WVD server specifically designed for surfacing up just applications, not the full desktop. So right now, it is connecting to a separate Windows server. So it's just doing that initial logon and connecting my profile disk and all those pieces. The first app just takes a second while it just kind of gets that user session going, because ultimately on the back end, I'm logging into Windows 10 on a different server. So it's just going to go ahead and get all of that going and get my profile attached. Once I'm signed in, it is fast, and I'll show you what that looks like. So now you can see I'm in Paint, and I can full screen it. I can do things like, draw, and that's really, really, really responsive for me. But something interesting I'm going to show you guys is, see, there's this little icon. Actually, let me do this since you probably cannot see that. So I'm just going to stop sharing briefly and share with the bottom so you can see the icon screen. So on the bottom, you can see that I have this little icon over Paint. So what I'm going to do is right-click on it, pin it to my taskbar, go ahead and close it. I'm not going to save this. I'll just open Notepad+. So that opened on my main screen. So that was significantly faster. So I could, start typing a bunch of notes if I wanted to. But point being, I have Paint here, and that icon's gone, but it's on my local Windows 10 device. If I click this, it just opened Paint as if it was locally installed here. And I think those are some of those really, really cool scenarios with remote apps that WVD is able to do. And like I said, once you're logged in, it is extremely responsive. I can open up Excel. It's going to probably open up again. Oh, no, it is opening on this screen. And this is within the WVD environment, but it looks like it's not. So again, I can see that I'm connected because of the little icon here, but there's just a lot of capabilities that are just possible through this. From a save as, this is the last thing I'll touch on, is we've made it so it's really focusing on saving to OneDrive, because again, we're not surfacing the full desktop here. If I go to browse, what should happen if we have it, is we've kind of taken the C drive off of this, and to kind of show where we don't really want people to save in places that we shouldn't have them at. So if you save it to the desktop, it will sync via OneDrive. If they save in documents, it'll sync via OneDrive. But you can see, like, I don't have the PC, the C drive listed. So that way you can even kind of use IT controls to guide users to put it into places where it's going to be synced into OneDrive. I can access those documents via the OneDrive app on my mobile phone or on my full-blown like local desktop. I can do all of those different pieces. So with that, I will go ahead and close out of this. I will pop this back open and we'll swap these around. And yeah, so we will open it up for Q&A with the final 5.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Justin. Please feel free to ask any questions through the Q&A panel, but in the meantime, we did have a few questions come through. So first up, how is WVD different from previous RDS environments?
So Remote Desktop Services was built on Windows Server. Windows Virtual Desktop, like I talked about, is really more of a platform that allows you to deliver remote desktop services, single Windows 10, single Windows 7, and then multi-user or multi-session Windows 10. So it's a means to deliver desktop virtualization where Microsoft is managing the virtualization infrastructure on their backend on Azure, and then you just bring the technology, the specific platform, again, RDS, Windows 7, single Windows 10, multi-user Windows 10, you get to decide what you want to bring. So you can bring traditional RDS into WVD, or you can use some modern capabilities.
Awesome. Next question, and I know you touched on this briefly, but how does WVD handle security and networking security?
Yeah, so there's a lot of guidance. So from a networking security standpoint, it's a bigger question, but again, we don't have to open ports like we usually do for remote desktop services unless we handle that internally within the LAN. If you want to be like true zero trust, you're not going to surface RDS ports to the public internet. If you're really hardcore about that, you would VPN and then you'd be able to connect. With WVD, you don't have to worry about exposing anything while still making it easy for your users and not have VPN dependencies. You use the modern desktop client, which again, I will pop back up. And this is going to do that reverse connect. So when I connect to standard desktop, this is all going through the Azure AD service to the WVD PaaS service. And then the WVD service is initiating the request back to my specific client device. And at that point, again, there's no open ports. It's very, very secure. And then I can add on things like multi-factor authentication and other conditional access policies where like only corporate devices can access the standard desktop. Your personal cell phone that's not enrolled in MDM, or your sister's computer that you are over there for a family event, you can't access it that way, or there's just significant restrictions. So there's a lot that we can do to give you the security you want from a network perspective, as well as just kind of these identity and device-based controls.
Okay, another one that came in. I'm assuming if we do not use OneDrive but map network drives to an on-prem server, that this would still function well?
Well is a question. So you could definitely do it, and it would work. It just depends on the type of files. So you could 100% do it. If you're dealing with large files, there's a much better way of handling that, where you can still leverage your file shares on premise, but kind of have them optimized in Azure too, which provides a lot from a business continuity backup DR standpoint. I probably wouldn't recommend doing it that way unless you worked with really small files and you had a strong firewall on-prem that's going to be doing the site-to-site VPN with Azure. If possible, 100%, you'll probably have a good experience if you have small files. If you have bigger ones, then yeah, we'd probably really look to re-architect it using like Azure File and Azure File Sync. So you're getting the best of both worlds, and it's just an optimized experience for your users with additional benefits.
Okay, and then the next question that we had come in is, what infrastructure is needed?
So that's the fun part. We highly recommend having a domain controller within the same virtual network in Azure as the either the RDS session host or the Windows 7 or Windows 10 session host that your users are ultimately going to be connecting to. All the past stuff is handled by Microsoft, and they have the regions where the WVD service is available. That's pretty much all the US regions are going to provide that level of capability. WVD is a global service, so if you're a organization spanning multiple countries, or you're a global organization, you can optimize WVD depending on where your users are. If you're doing it in a hybrid, which most customers are, you'll want to set up site-to-site VPNs between Azure and your sites. And there's different ways and means to achieve that, and cost-effective and performance ways. If, again, you're a larger organization, you need low latency, you need enhanced security, you can look at leveraging Azure Express routes, which are effectively like MPLS connections. So you have different opportunities, but really fundamentally, to get WVD working, you need a domain controller in Azure, which you can just create a new one and connect it back down to on-prem, site-to-site VPN to enable that on-prem connectivity, and just the session host that you want your users to be able to connect to. That's the bare minimum.
Okay. It looks like that is all of our questions for today. So I would like to give a big thank you to Justin from Red Level and United Training for hosting this session today. If you have any questions for either of us, feel free to reach out via the contact information on the slide.
Perfect. Thanks. Have a great day, everybody.